For about as long as I've been flying RC planes, Robart has been the gold standard in retractable landing gear. And when you get a set and sit down and look at them, you can see why that is. They do a very good job at design and manufacturing. And when I needed a set of retractable gear for my top flight giant scale P-51, Robart had a set designed just for that plane. Robart uses high quality metals and professional welding to be sure that these things can hold up to our warbirds. I use Robart's electric retracts because I like the simplicity and dependability of them. The specially designed electric motors are plenty powerful enough, but they have an amp out circuit, so if a wheel gets hung up, the motor just shuts off. And when you hit the switch to put the wheels back down, the motor starts right up again like nothing happened. That may sound like a little feature, but it can absolutely save an expensive airplane. The main mounting body has all the strength we need without adding too much weight to the plane. And they're formed to fit the P-51 mounting pockets precisely. All of the components that actually move the wheels up and down are very strong, again without adding a lot of weight to the plane. When the gear are fully retracted or extended, this block fits into a matching recess in the mounting block. Once that block reaches that recess, the gear are not moving until you tell them to. Adjusting the length of the strut or the towing angle of the wheels is easy thanks to these two set screws. I add a little bit of blue thread locker to these and they've always stayed tight for me. This control box comes with the retracts and does all the distribution of power to the retracts. That means you have one cable coming from the gear channel to this box. You can add a delay to any of the wheels if your plane needs that to be more scale looking. This box weighs close to nothing, so it mounts easily with double-sided tape. Robart uses high quality wire and a special locking plug. That means you have to use their extensions, which give you added security. The P-51 retracts have a threaded boss at the end that accept these axles that come with the kit. I'm using Dubro 5-inch wheels and they need the center hole drilled out to 1/4 inch. I always do that on a drill press to make sure I get it nice and straight through the wheel. The axle diameter is only 3 or 4 thousandths less than 1/4 inch, so you got a good tight fit. I add a little bit of grease to the bolt during assembly, and I've never had a problem with the wheel seizing on there. The Dubro wheels have a bit of a dish to the center of the wheel, so I had to add some washers as shims to make sure that the tire stays away from the down leg. This is actually a little too close yet, and I added one more washer before I put the wheels on for good. Before I assemble the wheels for good, I put a little blue thread locker in the boss and on the threads of the bolt and let that dry. I put a little bit of grease on the smooth part of the bolt that the wheel actually rides on. Then I turn the bolt as we feed it in to make sure that grease gets dispersed all over the bolt and the inside of the wheel. By the way, this is grease for RC cars, so I know it's plastic compatible. Then with the axle fully inserted, I can add the washers that I found I needed to keep the tire away from the down leg. Then I add just a little more blue thread locker to the threaded boss before inserting the axle. The axle in until there's about 1/4 inch of thread left. I'll put a little more thread locker on that and then finish turning the axle into the boss. I've had a wheel fall off before, and that ain't going to happen again to me. Then before installing the jam nut, I add a little more thread locker to the exposed threads. And with the wrench on the other end of the axle, I can tighten up the jam nut against the boss. Once that's tight, I check the wheel to make sure that it turns freely. There's still a little bit of drag on the axle, but that'll go away before this plane ever gets in the air. Taxi it up and down the field once or twice, and the wheels will be turning nice and smooth. Since I tried using the stock wire gear that came with the kit, which by the way turned out to be kind of a dumb idea, I have to remove them to get ready to put the retracts in. Now I can get at the strings that we used to pull the cables through to the root of the wing. Because I used the stock gear, I had to bring the strings up through the top of the wing rather than just pull the cables down through the root. This is a little bit harder, but it still works. I've never heard of a Robart locking plug falling apart, but I'm just in the habit of putting shrink tubing over all my servo extension joints. On this P-51, we have to have the gear extended to fit them into the mounting pockets. Rather than try and balance all this stuff on a fuselage, I use a spare receiver to make up a phony radio system so I can run the wheels up and down as I need to during installation. I keep that receiver bound to a spare transmitter so I can open the wheels up. And here we have to kind of catch them because they're not bolted down. There's lots of pinch points here, so you want to be careful where you're grabbing these things. Before I put any of this into the wing, I make sure that the extensions I have are in fact long enough. Usually they're a little too long, but we can stuff that back in the wing. I put a little masking tape on where I tied a string onto the extension so I can pull it through the wing structure easier. I'll be using the same screws to mount the retracts that we use for the stock gear, but I still add a little bit of thin C8 to the holes to toughen them up a little bit. Here I have the retracts installed, but I leave the screws a little bit loose because we need to line the wheels up with the wheel wells. There's usually a little bit of trial and error here, so just take your time and get the fit right. And this is where my fake radio system comes in really handy. It's just way easier to do all this fitting on the bench than it is with the wing bolted onto the airplane or balanced on the fuselage. This is the first time we tried retracting the gear, so I have to watch the wheels and see if they catch on anything. And the wheel is a little too far forward on this side and caught on the edge of the wheel well. I use little sticks of wood usually for shimming the wheels the opposite way into the wheel well before I tighten their mounting bracket down. This is just an easy way of keeping the wheels where we need them and then using both hands for tightening the bracket down. I'd like to say I only had to do this once, and I only had to do the other side once, but this side took a little fighting. Since the screws and the screw holes are almost size on size, there's very little play in this mounting bracket. I had to open the screw holes up just a little bit. I just used the next drill size. But that gave me that little bit of play that I needed to get the wheel better aligned in the wheel well. This is after the final adjustment. I just wanted to make sure that they go up and down cleanly, and I'll raise and lower them several times. It's not uncommon for a rough landing to move these brackets just a little bit, and you might have to realign one of the wheels. The good news is that it goes pretty easy once you know how to do it, and everything closes up nice and clean. You want to be careful where you mount this control box. There's usually a lot of room within the fuselage, but you want to measure to make sure you get it in the right place so it isn't hitting a servo or something inside. And that's it, my retracts are ready to fly. Now if we can get some decent weather. We need landing gear to work during taxiing, takeoffs, and landings. And in all three of those situations, the Robarts are way better than the wire gear that come with the plane. Fixed wire gear just don't work on a giant scale airplane. We let this clip in because of my warts and all policy with my videos. Even Robarts can't help when I try takeoff flaps and find out that that doesn't work on a P-51. I thought that maybe the mains had hit a hole or a bump or something, but when I gave it gas again, we found out that the P-51 just rotates up with them flaps down. With any kind of luck, you never see this P-51 on its nose again, and you sure won't see it with flaps down for takeoffs. We had gusty winds on the day we tried this, and at this end of our field it gets bumpy, and it almost catches me right here. Even Robarts can't help that. Another really important thing for retracts to do is actually have the wheels down when you come around for a gear check. Seeing wheels when I want to see wheels gives me that warm fuzzy feeling. One of the things I really like about these Robarts is their shock absorbing capabilities. You can see the wheels going up and down while you're taxiing, and they're taking impacts away from the airframe. I know it's hard to see here, but even while you're taxiing, we can see the wheels moving up and down in the struts as the plane hits bumps. And that prevents a hidden damage in the wings, and that prevents a disaster later on. I know people that think it's dumb to do touch and goes with any retracts, but I'm not afraid of that with the Robarts. So if you need a set of retracts, you need to look at the stuff from Robart. I use them and I'm very happy with them. And my plane is very happy with them when I don't slide it around too much.